The last thing I would just lay out would be that we also need to educate ourselves. So there's been a lot said today about education, but I do think going forward, a challenge for the U.S. is going to be the fact that very few Americans get much in the way of education at all about the African continent. It's not because they're bad or stupid, far from it, right? But for most Americans, unless you seek it out at university level, you don't learn much about Africa after you read about the Middle Passage and the Atlantic slave trade. And so it's not that surprising that a lot of people's ideas about the continent are anachronistic, extremely undifferentiated, driven by sort of big media meta-narratives that aren't terribly illustrative of what the challenges and opportunities are going forward. And I think that that is something that we do have to address if we wish to be the kind of nimble, thoughtful, meaningful and influential partner that we'd like to be to societies across the continent. And I think that it's a challenge that we need to consider. The other piece of working on looking in the mirror is recognizing the limits of our own influence. And this is something that, I don't know if Princeton's still here, but I've been talking to him about for at least 9 years. And it's one of my big takeaways from my own time in government, that no matter how much we may will a given outcome, we're usually not the most important actor in the mix, right, in terms of outcomes on the continent. And failing to recognize that, I think, leads us sometimes in policy directions that aren't at all fruitful. So there's this broad work to be done, I think, broadly, in terms of Africa literacy and collectively starting to think about the continent in a new way and getting a more informed and educated public that could support certain budget initiatives. And then there's, as a kind of policy community, recognizing the limits of our own influence, that sometimes our strategy needs to be a very long-term one and a rather complicated one involving multiple fora and multiple actors if we're really going to pursue all those different interests that Jennifer laid out. So thanks so much.